Everyone, welcome to this very first video tutorial on the topic of programming using C. We have been recently introduced to problem solving, where we identified ways of solving a problem, whether it was through the use of a flowchart or pseudocode, and then we would have also been introduced to the various parts of a pseudocode. So for this video presentation, we will be looking at one of the programming languages that we use whenever we're converting from a pseudocode algorithm to enabling the program to actually run on a computer system. So again, this is programming using C, and this first video tutorial is geared towards introducing items such as variables, getting used to the basic structure of a C program, and then from there we will begin to actually use a platform that we can write the codes using C. So let's go. First item that we're looking on is what is a variable, and again we would have covered this in previous videos, but we will just look at it quickly in the case of C. So we remember that a variable is a location in memory that is able to store information or data that would be constantly changing. So for this example, we're going to be displaying on screen where a user is asked to enter their name. So they would be provided with a slot where their name would be entered, and then from this point, once the user entered the information at the top right here, this would be the storage location or the memory location where the various names would be stored. So as it relates to variable, remember that it is a location where data can constantly change based on how the information is being received. So the first user or the first person's name was Bob. He went ahead and entered his name, and then from there the computer was able to transfer his name to store it in the memory location called name. So let's say a second person was given the very same prompt to enter their name as well, and then this person, who is Jill, came on, entered her name, and then the computer is also identifying that this name will be stored in the memory location called name. So in this second instance where we would normally see Bob, because the location allows for data to be changed, Jill's information is what will now be represented in this location. So as you are observing, our memory location, the information that is there is being changed, but it is the same location called name. So if we made a third attempt to ask a third user to enter their name, so let's say this is Ray enters his name, and then the computer transfers this name to store it in a location again where Jill's name is currently located. It will now be representing Ray's name. So for each user that keeps on using the system, the last user will be the last name that is represented in the location called name. So that would have covered a variable. Where constants are concerned, paying attention now to the memory location, constant is where the data remains the same based on the fact that we got some information. So in this case, let's say the location called name is just storing information for a person called Ray. So in this case, we realize that the person's name, which is represented by Ray, is now the name that keeps on or remains rather in that location. So we're not at this point changing any name because there is only constant, meaning that the person's name who was outlined to be stored in this location is what we would be seeing throughout the program. Next thing that we're looking at whenever we are creating variable names, along with these, we would be connecting what we refer to as data types, and the data types indicate what type of information would be stored at a certain place or a certain variable location. So for example, the location called name, we know that this would be text information that would be stored in this location. Then a good data type for this would be referred to as what we call a string. So a string is a location where we store text information, whether it is a single word, sentence format, paragraph, etc. As long as it is text-based information, then the data type would be referred to as a string. Let's say we wanted to enter person's age. So a data type in this case is what we refer to as an integer. So an integer would store values that are either positive or negative whole number. So if the person's age was 25, then the data type that would be used to store this person's age would be most likely an integer because it is actually a whole number. Another data type that we use in C programming is what we call float or real, and what this suggests is that these store data that is either decimal number, either negative or positive. So where an integer would store flat whole numbers, the float or the real stores the negative or positive decimal numbers. And as you can see, the examples are there just to indicate these. A third data type that we can also identify in the C programming is what we refer to as character, or char for short, and this indicates that this data type is able to store only one value. So let's say we were collecting from persons their gender, right? But for the gender, we don't want the full word male or female. We only want the first initial for each, which is F or M. Then a character would be the most appropriate option to choose in this stance. A next data type that we will come across throughout our programming, well, we won't be using the double for these examples, but the double is where positive or negative floating point or decimal numbers normally work all the way up to 8 bytes. So this is a little bit more advanced than the regular float slash real, right? All right, so string, we identified that earlier, that is for text-based information that is inclusive of characters and exceed the size of character, right? And then from here it collects whether it is letters, numbers, symbols that is normally represented as a text value. And the example here, I am a female, or a next one, this year is 2021. A next data type that we will be introduced to in the C programming is what we refer to as enumerated, or enum, which is short, and this normally store information that is grouped. So in the example here, we have a declare variable name called month, and then this provides the grouping of months that are involved in this in the year, to be exact, right? So whatever it is that you have in grouping, then the enum data type could be used. Another example could have been days, and then we could indicate the 7 days of the week. So those would be typical examples. Now we're looking at the basic structure of a C program, and the first one in the list is what we refer to as a header file, followed by the main function. We have documentation. We also have declaration and initialization. We have the body, and finally we have the return value. Now for the header file, it includes a header as well as a preprocessor, and again we will see these when we start the actual hands-on programming. So the header file contains the preprocessor as well as the header itself, which means that this is where we are able to identify a location in the program that we're using that keeps store of keywords or functions, such as what we will be able to allow the user to print or print message on screen to the user, or to accept entries or inputs from the user. So this, as it indicates, it initializes the environment of the program, meaning that it outlines what are some of the things that we can access and then be able to use these functions throughout the program. The next one is the main function, and this section allows for everything that we will be proceeding within the C program to be able to execute. So without the main function being involved in the program, then automatically the program will not be working. It's similar to having electricity for your microwave to work. Without the electricity, then nothing would happen in terms of your microwave. Documentation, it is at 3, but it could be at any point throughout the program. What this indicates is that we are able to make comments throughout the program just to give whoever it is that is reading the program an opportunity to know what each line of code or each section of code is about. So for example, we could initialize a comment at the header section just to indicate to someone who is going to be looking at the program to say, hey, this is the header section of our program, right? For the main function area, they could give a comment to say this allows for the program to actually start working and so forth. So the documentation could be anywhere throughout this structure, but it was placed here for the purpose of following a structure. All right, the fourth one, the declaration. We would have seen this in previous video where we are able to define the variables and or constants and then show their matching data type. So again, if the name, we know that name would have been a string data type, then we would have been able to declare that. And also for the C programming, we could use the declaration and the initialization as a 2-in-1. So instead of declaring and then initializing, we could have just culminate that into one thing and to display it. So it technically would have been declaration and initialization as one unit. But for the example, we broke it down. All right, the next one is the initialization. Again, initialization is where we assign values, whether it is the actual value or a default value, to either the variable names or variable location or constant. So in the previous example, when we did not change the name from Roy, we left it, or Ray rather, we left Ray name there and did not change it. So that would indicate that the variable location or variable called name was initialized with the name Ray. All right, the next example could have been if we were collecting numbers, then we could have initialized a name called number and assigned to it a default value of 0. All right, and then the body now is where the meat of the matter is. This is the part of the program that contains the messages that the user will see to know what instructions to follow, as well as to be able to enter their information so that the computer can read this and then at the end provide some output on the screen. And again, we will see all of these in an actual program. And then the final part of the C program structure is what we refer to as a return value or return statement, and this works similar as to what we refer to as a terminal. So it defines the end of a program. So whenever we reach to the return with a default value of 0, then this indicates that there is nothing more to be executed throughout the program. This is where we sum up everything and give you the requirements as to the purpose of conducting the program. And again, this would have been the introduction to C program. Please stay tuned for the hands-on activities that we will be doing. Thank you so very much for watching.